Sometimes I wonder why it is that I can have one day when I feel fully motivated, excited to get things done. I have a big to-do list and I'm just knocking things out off the list one after the other and feeling super productive, energetic, and great about myself and my day and how I'm doing. And the next day or the day before that, I don't want to do anything. I have no motivation. It takes so much effort to get myself to get going and accomplishing one thing on my to-do list. I don't talk about this a lot because I think to myself, there are times in my life when having a day like that, it didn't matter if I felt that way. I just had to do what I had to do. Whether I had a full-time in-person job that I had to be at, or I had little kids who were at home needing me 24/7, and it didn't matter if I felt like it or not. I couldn't stop doing my job in those cases. And at this moment in my life, I have a little more freedom of choice of how I use my time. And I feel a little sheepish talking about that sometimes if I do have a day when I'm not very productive. I feel bad like complaining about that or talking about that or admitting it, because I know what it's like to be in a stage time situation of life where that's just not even, you just can't, it doesn't matter how you feel, you just can't do that. But I do want to talk about it. So, what is the deal with it? Because most of the time I feel guilty or ashamed that I have these times when I don't feel motivated. And I wonder what's wrong with me, that I don't have the energy or the motivation or the excitement to go forward with my life that day or that part of the day or whatever. And I have this perception that other people don't feel this way, or if they do, it's because something's wrong with them. Like they're like fully depressed or something like that. And so I think that's why I don't talk about it a lot. And maybe we as a society don't talk about it a lot, and maybe it just depends on who you're talking to. But I think to myself, I cannot be the only one who feels this way. And if I do feel this way, then maybe there's a purpose to it or a reason for it. So what might that be? Could it be rest? We require rest in our days, in our lives, whether that's in little chunks each day or, after some really busy, productive days, we need a day of rest or a slower pace. That sounds reasonable to me. Because a lot of people talk about this hustle culture that we live in and how detrimental it is to us to just keep going and trying to do more without breaks or rest or slowing down to process and think about things. And I definitely think there's something to that. And honestly, I think that hustle culture or productivity mindset where we think that we need to be getting things done all the time or as much as possible is one of the problems we have with lack of mindfulness, which is something I've talked about in some of the other videos that I made, where it's important for us to have time to just not fill our minds. We spend so much time, or at least a lot of us do, with consuming and taking information in, which is awesome. I personally love to learn. I love to listen to podcasts and audiobooks, watch videos, read books, and take information in. But it's easy for me to think that more is more with that, and find myself filling all of my time with that. So if I have a little bit of downtime or I'm working on a task where I don't need as much brain power, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, I don't know, things like that, then I'll listen to a podcast or have a video playing in the background or something like that. And there's nothing bad about that. That's great efficiency, right? But if we're filling all of our time that way, or other ways, you know, picking up the phone, scrolling Instagram, another issue I've talked about previously in a video. If we're always filling all of our extra moments of time with attempts at being productive or at least busy, then there's no downtime to allow our minds to wander, and that's when you process things and kind of figure out what's going on in your life and what you want to have happen in your life and where you want to go from here and how things are going, and just assessing what's happening and how you feel about it and what you want to do about it, if anything. And sometimes I think this hustle culture or productivity mindset or whatever, this pressure to always be doing, that prevents us from having that time to process, which I think is really important for our lives. Have you ever felt a time when you were just so busy with life, going from one thing to the next, that you don't have time to even think about what you're doing? You're just doing, it's like putting out fires. You just have to keep going from one thing to the next, and you don't have any time to process it. And you feel like there's so many demands on your time and your attention that you don't get a chance to choose what you're doing with your life. So maybe that is one of the reasons why we have these days when we feel like we can't get ourselves to get going. Maybe there's something behind that. Maybe we are experiencing the need to slow down and let our minds wander and process what's been going on. Could that be? Maybe that's part of it. And if that is part of it, then we're doing ourselves a disservice by immediately attacking ourselves when we feel that way. Why am I so lazy? What's wrong with me today? Why don't I have the motivation to do the things I need to do? You know, all those thoughts that we can get looping in our heads, feeling ashamed of ourselves, feeling guilty, feeling bad about why we feel this way and why we don't have the energy and the motivation that we sometimes do other times. And maybe that is taking away this opportunity. And instead of feeling that way, maybe we could shift that thought process and think, oh, maybe I need to slow down a little bit. Maybe I need to let my mind wander. Maybe I need to process what's been going on in my life. However you do that, whatever works for you. And there may be things you haven't tried that you could try that you might find help you. A couple of things that come to my mind right away that sometimes help me when I want to figure out where my thoughts are and where things are in my life, in my mind, and how I want to move forward. One is just to sit and think. One is to make notes about the thoughts that I've had, or more than notes, to kind of journal about it. And oftentimes when I journal for processing purposes, I'll just get a notebook that I'm not keeping and just write about my thoughts randomly, just let them flow, not worry about how they sound or what anyone else would think if they read it, because they're not going to read it. It's just for me. Write about what I think, why I think it. I just write until I have nothing more to write, and then read it over again after that. And it helps me to understand my thoughts better sometimes, and like, oh, this is why I'm feeling this way, or this is why I'm thinking like that. And then oftentimes as I'm writing, I find myself processing it and coming to realizations about why I think what I do, and maybe what I could think or do instead, and how I could solve the problems that are coming up for me. So that's one I would definitely recommend trying if you haven't before or haven't in a while. I'm sure there are other reasons for feeling unmotivated, but just from thinking about it today, as I've been recording this video, I realized that this is probably a big one for me, and maybe it's one for you, and maybe it's something worth thinking about that you haven't thought about before. Oh, it is hot out here. I thought I was gonna sit out here and finish the video, but let's move inside, shall we? Curious if you have felt this way. Do you think it's for similar reasons to what I've talked about in this video? What are some other reasons that you think cause this? And do you think that everybody feels this way? Because I think there are some people who are just higher energy and have, I don't know if that means they're higher motivation though. I don't know. Does everybody feel this way? Because I'm definitely lower physical energy than some people, and that probably comes into play too. But maybe we all have these unmotivated days or times in life. And I do think that, like I mentioned earlier, the potential cause of depression and things like that. And I'm not, like, I definitely think that comes into play. No question. It's just not something that I think is the cause in my case right now. So I'm really curious to hear other people's thoughts on this. So if you're watching and you have some, I would love for you to share them either in the comments or in a direct message or email. And if you're interested in hearing what I have had to say about some of the other topics that I touched on briefly in this video, I'll put some links to one of the mindfulness videos, as well as the videos about taking time away from Instagram.